Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. This is the first in a series of videos designed to show how Americans think that Donald Trump is the greatest, and they march to his beat, consciously or subconsciously. The 2020 presidential elections were an aberration that he promptly rectified 4 years later, in a striking testament to his greatness. We will use the videos provided by some of his harshest critics to show how they subconsciously march to his beat, without realizing or appearing to realize that they are doing so. For the record, there are some token critics who give the appearance of criticizing him, when really, they are just monetizing anti-Trump noise. The main tactic that all forms of media have applied to varying degrees, to allow them to monetize Trump's unmatched ability to grab headlines, is called false equivalence or both-sidism. Because, when you present both sides of a debate as if you are unable to determine which is true and which is false or unfounded, then you are favoring that which grabs the headline the most. And if the headline grabber then follows up with a preponderance of headlines that will ensure that a certain percentage gets through unchallenged as the opposition becomes overwhelmed with headline fatigue, then it's game set and match to the greatest of all time. Nobody grabs headlines and invokes slogans better than Trump, and the media just can't get enough whether they love or loathe him. Without further ado, let us begin with our first offering, which is a video from Ari Melber at MSNBC titled, "Buyer's Remorse: Trump Rejected by Voters and Markets as Tariff Chaos Deepens Slump." It should be noted that there is no economic basis for the tariffs, or the formula for computing them. The so-called Trump tariffs have nothing to do with balancing trade. But in true Trump style, while the tariffs are dominating the global headlines, he is busy getting on with other more pressing matters. In true opposition style, while Ari is busy critiquing the tariffs, he is subconsciously validating other elements of Trump's agenda with his eyes wide closed. Now, if Trump is not the greatest at throwing up some stardust to bamboozle his critics into endorsing key elements of his agenda that they would otherwise reject or are naturally opposed to, then we don't know who is. Ari opens up his criticism by publishing a poll claiming that a majority of Americans think the tariffs will increase prices. This appears to be an attempt to give the impression that that opinion cuts across political divides. But those stats which are meant to indicate growing disaffection with his tariffs are actually reaffirming Trump's greatness, as we will point out at the end of the clip.
The markets. We've had these recession fears. We have a lot of Americans concerned about what they're living through, what they're feeling in the problems with Donald Trump's trade war and tariffs. There's new polling that actually shows this is not a left-right issue anymore, not one that goes half and half. This is 75%, a big majority of Americans concerned that the tariffs will juice prices.
It is important to understand that there is no economic basis for the tariffs that Trump has imposed for his own benefit, and here's an American-Australian economics professor, Justin Wolfus, reaffirming that during an interview on Times Radio.
A little bit there. We're going to start with that new trade deal between the US and the UK, signed yesterday on the 80th anniversary of VE Day. It's the first deal, we'll get onto that, between the US and another partner since Liberation Day, and something that UK leaders have been trying to achieve for a number of years. Now, a lot of conversation on this side of the pond has been on whether it's a good deal for the UK. We'll also get to that. What does the deal have in it for the US is what I want to ask.
It has a PR win for the president and almost nothing of macroeconomic significance. So let me put it in context for your listeners. Despite this Aussie accent, when I say we, I'm going to be American because I'm coming to you from America. So let me put it in context. Most countries around the world, particularly the industrialized countries, effectively gave up tariffs 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's been a period where tariffs lost the intellectual war and England reduced its tariffs because it understood it hurt the English. And America reduced its tariffs because it understood it hurt the Americans. And that's happened of all of the rich countries. It hasn't necessarily happened in the poor countries.
So, tariffs are mostly applied by poor countries to defend against the globalization founded on free trade that has enriched countries like America. And of course, being the founder and head of the rich pyramid, made America a haven for the citizens of the countries that it impoverished, such that in order to get a better share of the global cake, they were compelled to migrate to America, to do the jobs that had fallen below the minimum wage requirement of rich Americans, but represented a significant improvement on what was available in their home countries. But that's a debate for another time. So, when Donald Trump successfully upended the firmly established and long-standing principles of free trade and globalization for his own benefit, the best red flag or stick that Ari can come up with is a poll that claims 75% of Americans think tariffs will increase prices. Think. Only think. Ari, shouldn't you be more concerned about why 75% of Americans only think, and do not know, that tariffs will increase prices? Is that poll result not more an indictment of American society than Trump? Is it not evidence that Trump can make Americans doubt established principles? Is this not evidence that Americans do not think beyond headlines to work out that tariffs will increase prices? Is this not evidence of the media's failure to properly inform and educate? To put things in context, which of these variations of your poll headline drives the point home best, Ari? Is it clearer when it reads 75% of Americans don't know tariffs will increase prices? Or, is it more striking to say that 75% of Americans think the Pope is Catholic? How about 75% of Americans think 1 + 1 is equal to 2? Now, if we consider that later in his video Ari, without any sense of self-awareness or irony said,
And Catherine, we've seen that in the new polling that the tariffs are getting less popular the more people hear about them.
What do you mean the tariffs are getting less popular the more people hear about them? Would this be the tariffs that went global when they were announced over a month ago, on Liberation Day, and caused stock markets to crash all over the world with the threat of imminent global recession and worse for America? Would this be the tariffs that had lost the intellectual war some 50 years ago and have no economic basis? Would this be the same tariffs that were not fit for the purpose of addressing the trade imbalance that is a natural function of any society? Tariffs that at best should only be applied as a precision-guided missile to hit a clearly defined foreign target, but were deployed as a domestic WMD to blow up the foundations on which American prosperity had been built, and usher in a new world order without its leadership. And after over 1 month, polls were starting to show that these pivotal tariffs that heralded the beginning of the end of American world domination, and were a non-starter from the outset, were starting to get less popular, the more Americans were hearing about them. And this is something that the man who introduced the random tariffs with an ulterior motive, in the knowledge that the media would carry water for him by both sidesing the debate, should be concerned about. Was it not the media arguing both sides that helped to keep those Americans who could not look beyond the headlines, blissfully ignorant of the real threat from the tariffs that were never fit for purpose? Was it not the media that used polls as a ruse to avoid telling the truth so they could argue both sides of an issue that should be beyond debate? Was it not the media that used polls to help foster the impression that Trump was better for the economy because his tariff-centered policies generated better headlines, when a good faith assessment should have suggested otherwise? So, when Ari is talking about polls showing that the tariffs are becoming less popular the more people hear about them, he appears to be unaware that he is attesting to Trump's greatness and ability to manipulate all media, including himself, into selling the notion that the tariffs could ever do what he had claimed they would do. The notion that polls indicate that roughly half of Trump voters are concerned about tariffs that are not fit for purpose is just as damaging as the notion that 75% of Americans think tariffs will increase price. These are matters that should be beyond debate if the media was not arguing both sides. These polls are an indictment of Ari and his media colleagues, not of Trump, the man who is getting richer as he continues to make them all march to his beat. Critically, Ari goes on to acknowledge that those concerns may not necessarily translate into a loss of support for Trump, so what the heck?
We all cover stuff, right? There aren't a lot of 75% issues in American politics. Really. I mean, you tell people, well, Biden did it or Trump did it, right away you start to get a fissure. 75% and growing is the concern. And I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that those Republicans are turning Democrat in the midterms. It just means they were rooting for Trump. They do like him, and they're still mad and concerned about tariffs. Where does the deal fit into that?
Well, selling ice to Eskimos is one thing, but selling austerity and generational poverty to rich Americans is quite another. The man who sold mass deportation to American Latinos, a more robust U.S. approach in Gaza to Arab Americans, more restricted employee rights to unions, muzzled the media, his party, the opposition, the other branches of government, and the legal profession must be recognized for his greatness.
61% want businesses to actually say when the tariffs are affecting prices. Again, that's something the Trump administration has opposed. There was some back and forth with different retailers about it. Trump was angry and posting specifically about Amazon and Jeff Bezos about it.
Does Ari not understand or is choosing to ignore the fact that if the media was living up to its duty to inform and educate, then the issue of Trump dissuading retailers from advertising tariff surcharge on goods would not arise? Going back again to the 75% poll and American inability to look beyond headlines. Why the heck do Americans need to be told that the consumer pays the tariff? Who else is going to pay it? In the final analysis, Bezos backed down and Trump won the day, so is this not further evidence of his greatness? Even in this highly critical piece, Ari can't help indulging in some both-sidism.
In fact, when I show you 75% of Americans concerned about the tariffs, you have to look around to find people who still think this might be a good idea. Here's Fox News' Laura Ingraham.
No one wants what Trump is doing except, the MAGA crowd, the reset crowd. Wall Street doesn't want to do this.
That's part of how she was teeing up the issues to, of course, one of the Trump officials who's involved in all this. Trump is trying to sell austerity, but that's at odds with everything that he said during the campaign, right? That we would get prosperity and right away.
So, Ari, when Trump claimed during the campaign that prosperity would come right away, did you tell the public that this could not possibly be the case? Or did you and other media amplify that message on your platforms because it was sensational and headline-grabbing?
The punchline there that works, and it works regardless of who you voted for, or people who wanted a change from Biden, or people who thought Trump would bring prosperity like he said he would. This isn't really about the partisan imprint from last year's election. This is now about the governing of President Trump and how it's actually going. And people don't think it's going well. The punchline is there isn't really a good other side of this debate.
Sorry, Ari. After Trump gave you the sensational headline-grabbing campaign policies pre-election that you conveniently amplified at face value, you now want to conduct some heavily nuanced post-election analysis? Sorry, too late now. Trump didn't just say he would bring prosperity, he said he would bring it immediately, and by applying tariffs as well, or have you forgotten that critical bit? Just like he said he would end the Russia-Ukraine war immediately. Now you want to drop the sensational and headline-grabbing immediately, and just focus on the improvement. Sorry, you've been outmaneuvered by the greatest. He gave you what you wanted, in exchange for what he wanted. That, sir, is the art of the deal. He grabbed power while you grabbed headlines. The fact that he got more than you bargained for is evidence of his greatness. All these polls only matter to noisemakers like you, Ari. Contrary to your opinion, the polls confirm Trump's assertion that he can make America march to his beat. And you, the media who made him, now have to march to his beat.
Here's election. This is now about the governing of President Trump and how it's actually going. And people don't think it's going well. The punchline is there isn't really a good other side of this debate.
Whatever do you mean, Ari? No good other side of what debate? You managed to find a good other side of the debate when you were thirsty for sensational headlines, But now that he is implementing those campaign promises that you thought were just for headlines, now you can claim that there's no good other side.
But by the Trump plan, meaning what he said this was about, was dealing with the trade deficit countries, China, Mexico, Vietnam. Those are the big countries you see there where he says we're getting the raw end of the deal. That's what he and his allies have fixated on.
There you go again, Ari, presenting the policy at face value when you should know it has no value. Is that not both-siding? Is it beyond your intelligence or MSNBC's resources to get some experts who can tell you that you cannot use tariffs to address trade deficits on a wholesale basis? Here you are acknowledging that even taking them at face value they have failed, as if they ever could have worked, and it was the application rather than the concept that made them fail. Now, Trump got you twisted inside out and living in denial. One minute you claim there's no good other side and the next minute you are presenting the other side at face value. This is why Americans don't understand that the tariffs were never going to work, because people like you keep reporting on it as if they could. This is what Trump relied on when he announced them as reciprocal tariffs even though they were unilateral. He knew you would never give it to the public straight. Is that not evidence of his greatness?
This kind of handshake trade deal does not end all the tariffs. Bloomberg reports the framework basically leaves many key details for later. Key issues unresolved. Apparently, the goal is to get some sort of claim of a deal or a partial deal headline out there and save the hard stuff for later. And no amount of Bloomberg headlines about partial deals with England are going to change that reality that is barreling at American consumers and voters.
No way, Ari. Did you just say that no amount of headlines can change reality, after you and your colleagues had masked the reality of Trump's policies in exchange for the headlines that he was giving you? So, Ari, you do understand that Trump must be the greatest to have reclaimed the presidency, after January 6th, on the highly successful strategy of giving the media the headlines they crave above all else, including substance?
And to say that you want some kind of deal is absurd. I mean, he promised on day one many things he hasn't delivered. And now I think you said it best, to sell austerity rather than prosperity is something that is miles away from what he told his own constituents. But I think...
So, Ari's panel is criticizing Trump for not living up to his campaign promises to end the Russia-Ukraine war immediately, only mass deport immigrants who had committed crimes, protect the Palestinians in Gaza, secure workers' rights, protect free speech, and win the UFC heavyweight title, etc., etc. But above all, a man who can sell austerity to those he promised prosperity needs to have his image etched into Mount Rushmore.
I mean, this is the worst of Trump fumbling the ball, and I think that a lot of the voters that supported him are starting to get voters' remorse. Or buyer's remorse.
Buyer's remorse, yeah.
Because I think that he clearly has not only not did what he said, he's doing the opposite. It's causing inflation, it's causing it to stay where it is or rise, and it's going to cause a lot to his base, farmers and others that depend on a lot of the things that he's putting tariffs on.
Yeah.
If the so-called worst of the worst of his fumbles is not enough to make his supporters decamp, then why should he be concerned? In any event, Trump didn't fumble no ball. It is Ari and his media colleagues who bought the outrageous dummy or are unwilling to acknowledge that they bought the dummy, as they are busy marching to the beat that Trump drummed up to divert their attention away from his ultimate objective. You have to recognize his genius. Because when all the dust has settled, Trump will be one of the richest men in the world, as his constituency, who are getting poorer, rank him as the greatest ever.